My thumb traces the cold, engraved head of my silver cane, feeling the microscopic scratches in the metal, each one a silent witness to a name I've scratched out of the book of the living. The air in this village doesn't smell of autumn. It smells of wet wool, rotting thatch, and a specific, sharp acidity that only comes from a crowd waiting for a kill. I step off the coach, and the mud of Essex immediately claims my boots, pulling at my heels as if the earth itself is trying to keep me from moving forward. I am not a soldier, yet the men here part for me like I am carrying a plague. I am not a priest, yet they look at my black doublet and white collar with a terror that no sermon has ever managed to instill. I am a finder, a servant of the law, a harvester of the invisible, and a man whose very presence turns neighbors into informants. My hand moves to the leather-bound volume tucked into my belt. It is heavy, humid from the sweat of my hip, filled with depositions that look like ink but red like blood. To the world, I am the shield against the darkness, the one who can spot the devil's mark in the squint of an eye or the souring of a neighbor's milk. But as I stand here, watching the village magistrate approach with his hat held low and his hands shaking, I feel the familiar, hollow ache of the system I represent. The magistrate speaks, his breath hitching in the cold air, telling me of a woman who talks to her cat and a child who withered after a crossword. He wants a miracle of cleansing. He wants the pressure of his own fear removed and placed onto someone else's neck. I look at him, noting the frayed silk of his sleeves and the way he won't meet my gaze, and I realize he isn't looking for God's truth. He's looking for a signature that will authorize a tragedy. I grip my cane tighter, the silver biting into my palm, and prepare to enter the first house on his list. The hunt doesn't begin with a fire. It begins with a knock on a door that will never truly open again. I enter the first cottage, and the smell hits me, a mix of unwashed bodies, dried herbs, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. My boots crunch on the rushes covering the floor. I don't look at the woman standing by the hearth. I look at her shelf. I look at the bundles of dried mugwort and the way her butter churn is positioned. To a farmer, these are tools of survival. To me, they are potential evidence of a pact. I set my ledger on a scarred wooden table. The woman, Margaret, has hands that are stained green from the fields and cracked from the cold. She is 60, maybe 70, an age where the world usually stops looking at you, unless they need someone to blame for a dead calf. I watch her eyes. They don't dart toward the window. They stay fixed on my silver cane. She knows that in this room, I am the only one who decides if her prayers reach God or if her whispers are meant for the devil. I ask her to recite the 10 Commandments. It's a standard test, a psychological vice. Under the pressure of a man in black, even the most devout tongue can trip. She stumbles on the 6th. A flicker of triumph passes through the magistrate watching from the doorway, but I remain still. A slip of the tongue is a shadow, but I need the substance. I need the mark. I signal for my assistants, the searchers. These are women, often widows themselves, paid by the commission to find what the male eye cannot. They lead Margaret behind a rough wool curtain. I hear the sound of laces being undone, the rustle of heavy skirts hitting the floor, and then a heavy, suffocating silence. I wait in the main room, tracing the grain of the table with my finger. I am looking for the devil's teat, any mole, any skin tag, any insensitive patch where a familiar might suckle. It is a biological reality turned into a death sentence. The searchers emerge, their faces grim. They whisper of a small, raised spot beneath her arm. I see Margaret being led out, her shift pulled tight, her dignity stripped faster than her clothes. She is trembling, not with the supernatural, but with the sheer, crushing weight of being seen as a monster by the people she once gave bread to. I dip my quill. The ink is blacker than the corner of the room. I don't write witch yet. I write subject for further discovery. The system requires a slow burn. If I move too fast, the village loses interest. If I move too slow, I lose my fee, and the ledger must always be balanced. I look at Margaret one last time, and for a split second, I see my own mother's face in her exhaustion. I blink, and the image is gone. There is only the law, and the law says that if the devil is hiding in her skin, it is my job to dig him out. They move Margaret to the dungeon, which is really just the windowless cellar of the local inn, rented out by the town council. I follow. The stairs are steep, slick with a substance that might be water or might be the overflow of human misery. I sit on a three-legged stool, my ledger open on my knee. The only light comes from a single tallow candle that sputters and coughs, casting long, dancing shadows that the superstitious would call demons. I call them physics. Now comes the watching. It is the most effective tool in my kit. No rack, no red-hot irons. Those leave marks that judges dislike. No, we simply do not let her sleep. I sit across from her, my eyes fixed on hers. My assistants take turns walking her back and forth across the damp stone floor. If she nods off, they shake her. If she collapses, they lift her. Hour 6, she asks for water. I give her a small cup, but I make her wait until she repeats a prayer. Hour 12. She begins to hallucinate. She says she sees a yellow bird perched on the brim of my hat. I lean forward, my quill poised. And what does the bird tell you, Margaret? Does it speak with the voice of the one who promised you the world? The system is designed to break the boundary between the mind and the mouth. After 24 hours of enforced wakefulness, the brain begins to weave its own nightmares into reality. She starts to babble about a man in black who met her in the woods 20 years ago. She's describing me, or perhaps a memory of a long-dead husband, or maybe just the shape of the shadows on the wall. It doesn't matter. I record it as the black man of the forest. I watch her hands. They are clawing at her own skirts, the fingernails drawing thin red lines on her skin. This is the material reality of a witch hunt. It is the slow, methodical extraction of a confession from a body that has forgotten how to lie because it has forgotten how to think. I feel the exhaustion in my own bones, the grit behind my eyelids, but I cannot stop. My fee is contingent on a confession. If she walks free, the village keeps their coins, and I go hungry. By hour 30, she is weeping, a sound like dry leaves skittering on a grave. She admits to the bird, she admits to the man, she admits to the mark. I blow on the ink to dry it. The magistrate, watching from the top of the stairs, crosses himself. He thinks we've found a monster. I know we've just manufactured one out of sleep deprivation and a 60-year-old's grief. I close the book. The trap is shut, and the bureaucracy of death begins its next turn. The sun rises on the third day, but it's a pale, sickly thing that doesn't reach the depths of the village square. I am sitting in the parlor of the local tavern, which has become my temporary office. My ledger is no longer just a book. It is a balance sheet for the town's soul. And business is booming. The magistrate sits across from me, counting out coins. This is the part they don't put in the sermons. I am a private contractor. My fee is 20 shillings for the investigation, plus expenses for my horses, my assistants, and the searchers. for a village that lost its entire harvest to the rye rot. This is a staggering sum. They aren't paying for justice. They are paying for a scapegoat, and the price of a scapegoat has never been higher. A line has formed outside the door. Now that Margaret has confessed, the dam has broken. Suspicion is a contagion more efficient than the plague. A blacksmith enters, twisting his leather apron in his hands. He doesn't look at me. He looks at the floorboards. He tells me that his neighbor, a man he's known for 30 years, once looked at his anvil, and the next day, the iron wouldn't take the heat. I scratch a line in my book. Next, a young woman with a bruised eye claims her sister-in-law muttered a curse, and now her milk has turned to stringy yellow bile. I scratch another line. I watch their faces. They aren't lying. At least they don't think they are. They are terrified. The 17th century is a world where God is high and distant, but the devil is as close as the draft under the door. When the cattle die, when the roof leaks, when the child coughs blood, someone must be responsible. The alternative, that the universe is indifferent and cruel for no reason, is a horror they cannot survive. I am the man who gives their suffering a name. I am the one who tells them that their misfortune isn't bad luck. It's a conspiracy. I lean back, the wood of the chair creaking under my weight. My silver cane leans against the table, reflecting the weak morning light. I realize that I am the most powerful man in this county, not because I have a sword, but because I have a quill and a narrative. I am the architect of their paranoia. Each name I add to the list is another shilling in my pocket and another body for the gallows. The magistrate leans in, whispering that there is a wealthy widow on the edge of town with a large orchard and no heirs. She's always been difficult, he says, his eyes glinting with a different kind of hunger. He isn't looking for a witch now. He's looking for land. I dip my quill. The ink is getting thick, clogging the nib. I don't hesitate. I write her name. The system doesn't care about the purity of the motive. It only cares about the momentum of the machine. The hunt is no longer about Margaret. It's about the village feeding on itself, and I am simply the one holding the cutlery. The atmosphere in the village has shifted from a simmer to a boil. I am no longer just a man. I am a mechanical force of nature. I walk the streets, and the silence is so heavy it rings in my ears. Doors bolt as I pass. People pull their children inside, as if my shadow alone could carry the curse. But there is a new name in my ledger, and this one requires more than just watching. It requires pricking. The subject is a man this time, a tanner named Thomas. He's strong, stubborn, and he made the mistake of laughing at the magistrate in the public square 3 months ago. Now, he stands chained to a ringbolt in the wall of the jail. I have my tool in my hand, a long, slender brass pin, polished until it gleams like a needle of gold. Pricking is the ultimate marriage of theology and biology. The theory is simple. The devil's mark is dead tissue. It will not bleed. It will feel no pain. If I can find a spot on Thomas's body that is silent under the needle, the case is closed. I begin at his shoulder. I push the pin into the skin. Thomas screams, a raw, guttural sound that vibrates the very stones of the cell. I pull it back. A bead of dark, healthy blood blossoms. Not here, I mutter. I move to his back, then his thigh. I am methodical. I am a tailor working on the garment of a soul. The magistrate watches, his face pale but his eyes fixed on the skin. Every scream from Thomas is a testament to his innocence. Yet in this room, innocence is just a delay. There is a secret to my trade. a secret that stays between me and the brass pin. Sometimes, when the fee is high and the town is restless, I use a blunted needle. It's a clever bit of engineering. The point retracts into the hollow handle. To the observer, it looks like it's sinking 3 inches into the flesh. To the victim, it feels like nothing at all. I find a spot near the base of his spine. I use the hollow needle. Thomas, exhausted and braced for the agony of the previous 20 stabs, feels only a dull pressure. He doesn't scream. He doesn't flinch. "Behold," I say, my voice flat and clinical. "The devil has numbed his own." The magistrate gasps. Thomas turns his head, his eyes wide with a confusion that is more heartbreaking than his cries. He looks at the spot where the needle appears to be buried in his back. He knows he felt nothing, and because he is a man of his time, he begins to wonder if I'm right. He begins to wonder if the devil did visit him in his sleep. This is the most terrifying part of my role. I don't just convict them in the eyes of the law. I convict them in their own minds. I leave them questioning the very fabric of their own memories. I wipe the blood, the real blood, off my hands with a linen cloth. I have my evidence. Thomas is no longer a tanner. He is a vessel of the void. And tomorrow, the town will pay me an extra 10 shillings for the discovery. I walk out into the cool night air, the brass pin heavy in my pocket. My hands are steady, but my heart feels like a piece of cold iron, forged in a fire that no longer gives off heat. I am the only one who knows the truth, and in this world, truth is the most expensive thing there is. The day of the cleansing has arrived. The village square is a sea of gray and brown, a mass of bodies huddled against the wind that smells of damp earth and wood smoke. In the center stands the apparatus, a simple wooden beam, a sturdy rope, and a ladder. It is not an instrument of justice. It is a stage for the final act of a social ritual. I stand on a raised platform, the magistrate to my right, my ledger open one last time. I look out at the crowd. I see the blacksmith who accused his neighbor. I see the young woman who blamed her sister-in-law. They aren't cheering. They are silent, their eyes wide with a mixture of relief and a creeping, icy dread. They've realized that the machine they helped build doesn't stop just because one person is removed. Margaret is led out first. She is so small now, swallowed by her own tattered shift. She doesn't fight. She doesn't even look up. The watching and the pricking have done their work. Her spirit didn't just break, it evaporated. She climbs the ladder with the mechanical obedience of a sleepwalker. When the noose is placed around her neck, she says nothing. She has already been living in the afterlife for days. Thomas follows. He is different. He looks at me, not with hatred, but with a profound, hollow curiosity. He is still trying to understand how a brass pin and a man in a black doublet could erase a lifetime of hard work and honest living in 72 hours. He opens his mouth to speak, but the executioner, a man who is paid by the head, moves quickly. The ladder is turned. There is no dramatic drop. This is the 17th century. There is no calculated snap of the neck. There is only the slow, rhythmic swinging, the creak of the hemp rope against the timber, and the sound of 100 people holding their breath at once. I watch the life leave them, noting the physiological shifts, the darkening of the skin, the final desperate twitch of the fingers. I record the time of death in my ledger. As the bodies settle into a still, heavy hang, the crowd begins to disperse. They walk away quickly, shoulders hunched, heading back to their cold cottages and their dying cattle. The witch is gone, but the rot in the rye remains. The devil has been found, but the hunger will return tomorrow. I close my book. My work here is done. The magistrate hands me a heavy leather purse. The silver clinks, a bright, cheerful sound that feels like a slap in the face of the silence. I don't feel like a hero. I don't even feel like a hunter. I feel like a clerk who has just finished a very long, very tedious day of filing. I walk toward my coach, the mud still pulling at my boots. I pass the gallows, and for a second, the wind catches the bodies, turning them toward me. I don't look. I climb inside, pull the velvet curtain shut, and tell the driver to move on. There is another village 20 miles north. There is another magistrate with a list. And there is always, always more room in the ledger. I am back in the carriage, but the weight of the purse on my lap feels different today. It is heavier, yes, but it is also colder. I open it and pour the contents onto the small, folding desk I use for travel. The silver coins spill out like teeth. Shillings, sixpences, and a few rare, heavy crowns. I begin to sort them, not out of greed, but out of a habit of survival. The 17th century does not offer a pension for finders. I am a man who trades in the currency of the invisible, and my overhead is high. I set aside the searcher's cut. I set aside the fee for the jailer who kept the candles burning during the watching. I set aside the cost of the oats for my horses. What remains is my profit, the price of 2 lives and a village's worth of shattered peace. I pick up a single shilling and hold it to the dim light filtering through the carriage curtain. King Charles's profile stares back at me, regal and indifferent. I think about the blacksmith's anvil that wouldn't heat. I think about the milk that turned to bile. These are the mundane tragedies of rural life, the result of bacteria, poor metallurgy, and bad weather. But to the people of Essex, these were the footprints of the devil. And I am the one who sold them the boots. I realized then that the witch finder is the most necessary cog in the machinery of a failing state. When the crops fail and the wars in the north drag on, the people need a reason that isn't the king's taxes or the parliament's incompetence. They need a monster they can actually catch. They need a tragedy they can control with a rope. I am not the hunter of the supernatural. I am the janitor of the social order. I sweep up the friction between neighbors and burn it in the public square so they can go back to their fields for one more season. I pick up my quill and open the ledger to the back page. I don't write names here. I write numbers. Total accused, total confessed, total executed, total revenue. The ink is dry before the carriage reaches the next crossroads. I lean my head against the wood of the carriage and close my eyes. I try to sleep, but the sound of the wheels on the gravel sounds like the rhythmic scratching of 1,000 pins against 1,000 skins. I am a wealthy man, by the standards of this mud-soaked county. But as the carriage lurches into a pothole, I feel a sudden, sharp pang of vertigo. I wonder if the tide ever turns, if the law ever decides that the finders are more dangerous than the found. Who will be the one sitting across from me in a windowless cell? Who will be the one holding the silver cane? The thought passes. I am the law, for now. I pull the wool blanket tighter around my shoulders and wait for the smell of the next village to drift through the window. The 17th century witch trials were never truly about magic. They were a fever dream born of a society under extreme pressure, economic collapse, religious war, and a desperate need to find order in a chaotic world. Men like Matthew Hopkins, the self-styled witch finder general, exploited this psychological frailty to build an empire of fear, proving that the most dangerous thing in a village isn't a curse, but a neighbor with a grievance and a system that rewards the hunter. Today we look back at the pricking and the watching, as relics of a dark and ignorant past. Yet the machinery of the witch hunt hasn't vanished. It has simply changed its tools. We still see the same patterns of mass paranoia, the same rush to condemn before the evidence is gathered, and the same quiet profit made by those who fan the flames of public fear. The silver cane has been replaced by the digital algorithm, but the ledger remains open, waiting for the next name to be scratched in. History warns us that when a society stops looking for the truth and starts looking for a scapegoat, the fire never stays in the hearth. It eventually consumes the house.